This is the ancient and mysterious city of Prague. Tonight we will investigate one of the most iconic buildings in this capital, the Old Town Hall. This is night one of Most Haunted Live. Hello, good evening and welcome to our viewers in the UK and to our new ones here in Czech Republic. We are in the city of Prague. It's a beautiful city, also known as the City of 1,000 Spires. Prague is one of the most well-preserved areas in Europe. The city is beautifully Gothic and surrounded in a veil of ancient folklore and mystery. Prague's narrow and cobbled streets are said to have been home to some of the most colourful and at times terrifying characters recorded in history, from corrupt, self-proclaimed alchemists and medieval executioners to the more recent executioners, the Nazis, and perhaps most unnerving of all, the devil. For the first time in Most Haunted Live's history, each night we will broadcast live from 4 very different neighbourhoods, with the studio nestled deep in the heart of these historic and allegedly paranormal-riddled locations. For the first night of this Most Haunted Live, we will be basing ourselves here at the Old Town Hall, right in the centre of Prague's Old Town. Now, joining me now are Paul Ross and Julian Clegg, who will be guiding you through the evening here in the hub. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome, and I'm so honoured to be back here. This is after New York and London, my favourite city in the world. And you arrive on 20th century technology, the airplane. You come into this city, a 21st century city, but as night falls, you are back in medieval times, and you feel it. Now, I'm open-minded, but you feel something special about this place because it is so mysterious and so amazing. It's a fantastic city.
And the different thing about this particular live is that you guys are coming with us to each different location. We're investigating. How are you feeling about that?
I'm really excited about that. That means the whole crew are coming each night at different locations, so we can't wait, to be honest. Yvette's going to be joining us for more chat in just a few moments' time. But first, what's coming up in the first hour?
There was many different types of execution throughout the world. In Europe, they were very fond of beheading people, execution by the axe, by the guillotine later on. They also used death by hanging, which was quite common in England. A lot of the punishments were barbaric. They were seen as punishments rather than a way of putting someone to death. So the actual whole process of execution was drawn out. They would suffer before they actually died.
Welcome back to Most Haunted Live from Prague. We've based ourselves in the heart of the Old Town. In fact, we're in the cellars, the basement of the Old Town Hall, which dates back to about the 1300s. An amazing building, as we heard from a historian, Leslie Smith, full of paranormal possibilities and historical fact. A very strange place, an unnerving place here after dark, and somewhere where atrocities have been witnessed many centuries ago, and in fact, even in the last century, because sadly, Prague was occupied by the Nazis and hideous, hideous scenes occurred here. Now, we have a lot to get through tonight. We'd like to show you now just a bit of what might lurk in store for the team here in the Old Town Hall.
Prague has just always been a magnet for people who are interested in parapsychology, the paranormal, and the occult. If you've been in Prague for longer than 15 minutes, you've already looked at this thing. We call this the orloj, the astronomical clock. Back at the time when the orloj was built, there was supposedly nothing else like this in all of Europe. City councilors of Prague at that time were very jealous of this clock's uniqueness. So they became a little bit concerned when they started to hear a rumor floating around Prague that Master Hanush, the builder of the clock, received a commission from another city to build another clock for them, even bigger, better, and more fabulous than our orloj. Now, for obvious reasons, city councilors didn't want to let that happen. So they blinded it, put out both of his eyes so that he would never be able to design anything for anyone else ever again. At first, he felt hurt. He felt betrayed by that. He thought, this is how they repay me for all my years of work, for my masterpiece? But the more he thought about it, the more he started to get angry, until he was overcome with an overwhelming desire to seek revenge. Now, Master Hanush was standing just behind that dial over his beautiful machine. He ran his hands lovingly over all of the gears until he found exactly the right one. Now, he grabbed a hold of that gear and he pulled on it with all of his might until it snapped and the clock stopped. And they say that in the first moment of that silence, Master Hanush's heart broke and he fell down dead on the floor next to his beautiful machine. And most people of Prague still believe that to this day, Master Hanush's spirit still resides inside that clock, keeps it turning and functioning smoothly year after year, decade after decade. These crosses represent probably one of the single most important events in all of the history of Bohemia. Just outside of Prague at the Battle of the White Mountain, where more than 7,000 men were slaughtered in a little over 2 hours. Now, after that incredibly bloody battle was finished, the Austrian authorities arrested the 27 ringleaders of that rebellion. And about 6 months later, on the 21st of June, 1621, those 27 men were brought here to the square, and one by one, they were marched up onto an execution scaffold that stood on this exact spot where the crosses are, and then they were put to death. The Austrian authorities took 12 of those severed heads and they put them inside of iron baskets. They took them over to the Charles Bridge and they hung those baskets containing the heads from the roof of the bridge tower to serve as a warning to anybody else who might have the super intelligent idea of rebelling against the empire. The legend is this: the 27 executed nobles return to the Old Town Square every year. Now, what they say is that the nobles come back here, if they look up the clock and they see that it's broken down or it's malfunctioning in any way, then they know that there is a problem in Bohemia, a big problem.
A fascinating report, and joining us now is Jeff Fritz, who led us on that tour, and Hannah McGee, a paranormal expert. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Hannah, it's obviously a hugely historical city. What is it you share? What secrets do you share with the people you take on the ghost tours you do?
Well, definitely there are a lot of legends connected to the city. Few stories you have seen actually on this show. We have about 5 tours, so we cover a lot of different areas. We cover Old Town area, we cover Bridge area, we cover Castle area, basically all the ghosts that are connected to that particular spot, particular area, we share with people. We tell about it to our people.
And it's such a fascinating city historically, Jeff, because it's been at the heart of European civilization, well, for thousands of years, but certainly for the medieval era and the modern era. And you mentioned the 27 noblemen. How important was that as a turning point in the history of the Czech Republic and this area?
It was a turning point. That was the effective beginning of the 30 Years' War, a period of time that pretty much laid waste to all of Europe, caused untold strife and suffering that had never been seen prior to that time and has been seen very rarely since.
It's amazing this is a kind of cauldron for that kind of activity, because of course the Nazis marched into Czechoslovakia in 1939. They then went into Poland, which started the Second World War, but they were here then again. It seems that Czech Republic is at the heart of so much death and destruction.
Yeah, it was once said by a very famous German chancellor that he who controls Bohemia controls Europe. So, strategically speaking, for many centuries, this has been a place that armies have passed through and a place that's been very important for different people to control for all kinds of reasons.
Now, Hannah, we're here for 4 nights investigating, the team are. Are there any spirits or ghosts or legends of ghosts they should be particularly afraid of? Who are some of the nastier characters who might pop up?
Well, afraid of, I would say a lot of characters are not nasty, they are more or less victims of our history. A lot of them are actually here in these areas, in these underground tunnels. They will be the 27 noblemen who spent their last night before the execution. It could have been the executioner who was definitely here with them. Could have been Jan Želivský, who is probably 2 centuries before, who was tortured here in one of the chambers. I don't think people should be afraid of them, but they could be felt. Their energies are present here.
I think there's a lot to be felt here. Thank you both very much for sharing your expertise with us. Well, we've heard about those 27 noblemen executed. We're now going to learn a bit more about the man responsible for those deaths on that blood-drenched day back in June 1621.
Midrash was an educated man who hoped to become a doctor. In his teens, he fell in love with a young local girl, Dorothy. In 1582, he moved to Prague, where he hoped to study medicine. In his absence, she fell pregnant and married another man. Shortly afterwards, both her husband and her child died in mysterious circumstances, and Dorothy was arrested for murder. Midlash was distraught upon hearing his beloved had been imprisoned, and convinced of her innocence, vowed to set her free. It is said that Midlash took the job as executioner here in Prague for one reason and one reason only, and that was to get his Dorothy out of captivity. Unfortunately, the attempt failed, and finding himself completely disowned by his family and abandoning all hope of a career in medicine, he kept his title role as executioner. The mask he wore concealed not only his face, but also his shame. To make matters worse, Midlash went on to learn that Dorothy was indeed a cold-blooded murderer. His life was troubled further on the 21st of June 1621, a day when Midlash would shape European history by executing 27 noblemen on the town hall steps, including his friend Dr. Janeski.